Hi, and welcome to Freedom Fighters Code Gray. This is a show where we discuss human trafficking, an issue that's taking place in our community. Please note that some of the content in today's show may be triggering, as we will be discussing subject matter related to trauma and exploitation. If you are looking for information and support related to human trafficking, you can call the Canadian Human Trafficking Hotline 24/7 at 1-833-900-1010. That's 1-833-900-1010. Today I have with me the Executive Director of the MNLCT, Dwayne O'Connor, and we're going to be having a conversation about what is trafficking in our community, what does it look like, how could it be prevented, and also what are some of the barriers folks who have experienced trafficking face and what supports are needed as they work towards their healing journey. So welcome, Dwayne. I'm so grateful that you're here for this conversation today.
Thank you very much for having me.
So I thought maybe just to start off our conversation today, could you share a little bit about yourself and the work that you're involved in at your organization?
Okay, great. Like I said, my name is Dwayne O'Connor. I'm the Executive Director of MNLCT. And what I have been experiencing and what I've been involved in is mostly started out as medical and psychiatric. And then I moved into the private sector, and then I started working in the public sector for ways to help the homeless, for ways to help people that are disenfranchised, for people who are poverty-stricken, and find a way to get them back on track again, or at least get them off the track that they're currently on. When I was working in medical and psychiatric, I saw a lot of commonalities, and a lot of these pieces where you try to help are usually they're barriers to those particular instances of help, because there's no money, there's no assistance, and that's how I got further involved into homelessness and transition homes. I used to run quite a few shelters. I ran a family shelter, a women's shelter, a youth shelter, and a youth transition home.
Wow. It sounds like you've had quite a journey from coming from maybe a medical background to private practice, and then being the front line, so to speak, and assisting people who are experiencing various forms of marginalization or oppression in community. And so the organization that you're with now, tell me a little bit about what work are you focused on doing, what services do you offer to the community, and what does your role look like in all of those areas?
Okay. All right, I'll do my best with it. So I am with a company that deals with settlement and integration as the primary focus. So we take in newcomers and we help them get settled and integrated into Canada by providing them language training on the different job aspects, budget, trying to get themselves into a self-sustaining ability. We also provide them training to help them get the former education that they had in their other country and get that to be acceptable in this particular country by getting them the right certifications, the right education pieces, whether that means that they are certified or they have their own degree, and get that to be acceptable in the Canadian market. Through that particular process, we find a lot of people who are running across human trafficking in certain ways, I should say. Not everyone, but there are a lot of people that have their kids, and while they are trying to immigrate, they are approached by people that are trying to encourage them to come over to do what they want them to do and be human trafficked, basically.
Wow, so you're seeing in your efforts and your work in the community to assist newcomers, right, with settlement and integration, really traffickers in some way reaching out to these folks and for clandestine purposes, and reaching out to them and perhaps offering different work of various kinds, for example, or different promises, yes, when in reality the purpose that they're intending is to traffic and exploit them.
Exactly.
Yes. Would you say, when it comes to newcomers to Canada, what particular vulnerabilities, if you will, or things that traffickers are identifying that maybe make this community at risk for experiencing trafficking?
A lot of it's language and social isolation, and not to mention poverty. Poverty is probably the biggest key for that particular piece. I meant to say also that we run a home for human trafficking. So we have a very small home right now called Aurora House that we take in about six to seven residents for people who identify as women and their children into this particular house, and then we look after them, provide them care and that sort of thing. But to go back to your other question, the people become vulnerable when they see them in the different communities. I don't know what else to call them. They used to call them coyotes, but they're not really coyotes. Like for immigration, they are more just people looking to capitalize on what vulnerabilities they see. They see that someone needs help, see that they can't pay their particular bills, see that they can't pay for their immigration status papers, which we do for free, but they don't know that a lot of times, and we have to actually educate them on it. But if they think that there is an option to where they go with this person and they are promised jobs, some get involved romantically even with some of these people, and they get lured into a kind of a contract, and the contract usually says, I'll pay for all of this for you if you come and work for me. And then they get into this contract where by next year you'll be done and you can go free to live your life and that sort of thing. That usually never happens, or something much worse happens in the process.
And what you're sharing with me, it brings to mind the concept of debt bondage, right? Where it's like, I've done all this for you,
That's right.
and now you owe me. But then as that person works to pay off the debt, they continue to accumulate
That's
debt
right.
because that individual continues to, the trafficker will say, well, now you owe me money
That's
for
right.
this and this service I provided you and that health bill or whatever
right.
it is.
Exactly.
And it really becomes many years versus like that 1-year contract, so to speak. Now, something I just wanted to maybe clarify for our viewers is, as you were sharing the different aspects of migration, I heard you talking a little bit about smuggling too, and then trafficking. And sometimes there's like this misconception that smuggling is trafficking, but they're different. Migration and trafficking can be related,
That's
right? But they are different types of crime. Could you maybe like speak to that a little bit in terms of like what would constitute trafficking specifically?
So trafficking usually means that you're just literally moving human packages, basically, to get them to do from one thing to another. So it's not like you're moving something that's not alive. You're literally trying to get someone and encourage them to do certain things for you in their contracts. And sometimes the contracts go beyond bondage through debt. Sometimes there's threats involved. A couple of our clients recently were threatened for their family back home. So if you don't do this for us here in Canada, we will go after your family back home, and that makes them do more for that particular person that's trying to actually get them going.
Right, so there's threats, there could be debt bondage, there could also be force, there's these different manipulation, these different aspects, right? And also trafficking doesn't necessarily involve moving across borders. No. It can happen within someone's own community,
That's
whereas smuggling is moving one person from to another country illegally, That's right. essentially, right?
That's right. We did have, this is actually a couple of years back, in downtown Barrie, a couple of young people were actually taken, and the report that we got back with what happened to them, and these were 16, 17-year-olds. Both young ladies. They were taken in the middle of the night by a drug dealer, basically, and they were taken to Dubai. And we found out they were in Dubai through law enforcement. And then they were able to, one was able to come back home. The other one, they could not find.
And would you say in that situation, like were they taken to Dubai for the purposes of exploitation and trafficking?
Yes, for sex exploitation.
Okay.
Exploitation.
For sexual exploitation, wow. And that was from here in the city that we're filming in, that situation happened, right?
It's shocking. It's, well, when I used to run the shelter here for the Salvation Army, that's where we found out about that particular instance, where we were doing the outreach for the streetwalkers, I guess you can say, the sex workers that walk around the streets at night, and that's where we found out about that situation.
Wow. And so I think that's like really important to highlight that, when we think about trafficking, we often think, oh, it's happening in other places, in other communities, in other countries, but recognizing that it does happen anywhere, and it can happen in cities, big or small, and different folks can be targeted, whether it's newcomers of various ages or young people, right? Like you mentioned, teenagers. So I'm wondering, when we talk about trafficking in Ontario, when we're looking at the local context, and you mentioned a couple examples, how else do you see trafficking happen in Ontario?
Well, I can give you an example of one particular area that we investigated, found out in a local restaurant, not in Barrie, but this was in Toronto area, where almost the entire staff were trafficked people. So they are all working there for less than pennies on the dollar. None of them actually get paid in person. The trafficker gets paid, who's one of the owners of the restaurant, and then they keep them working for a very, very long schedule. We're not talking just 8 to 10 hours or 12 hours. We're talking about almost a 17-hour day. And all the entire staff are working that way. And you would think that with that large amount of people, that someone would actually start trying to speak up and actually try to get involved with law enforcement. The only problem is with that is that you have to prove it. And when they go to law enforcement, sometimes law enforcement will come in and they will address the owner, and the owner will have a very, very very, very good story of why they're working here, and they don't have any of this, that, and others because of language. They don't have their own bank account, so I had to take care of everything, and that's why I stayed that way. But it's human trafficking. All of them that you interview individually, and there were very few that we were able to interview, that said that they had to do this work or their mother wasn't going to be well back in their home country. One had 2 children back in their home country. You'll never see your children again unless you do this work for me. And they continue to work.
Wow. I think what that example really points to and highlights is the different forms of trafficking and exploitation that happen in places that people use on a daily basis, right? Like you mentioned, like walking in the streets of town, that there's different exploitation, but then also in a restaurant, you're pointing to labor trafficking.
That's right.
And when folks come and I'm really grateful that your organization provides language support services, because that's huge, right? Like when someone comes to Canada and maybe they're offered a promise of work or something like that, and they're recognizing that workplace is not providing what they need to meet their basic human rights,
right,
if you will, and they can't speak a language that could potentially even reach out to law enforcement. Like there are so many barriers there.
There are. And a lot of really good ways that the traffickers know how to manipulate the people that they're manipulating. They know how to actually tell them, like, okay, you can't speak English, so here, watch this program. They'll think they're watching television. It's something from back home. And there's nothing that shows about the different rights and regulations and that sort of thing, nothing that's Canadian specific, nothing in French or English will they allow into those particular environments. And they'll keep them closed out. And they just use them day in, day out. There was another one that we were able to investigate. This is from when I did work at a community health center. And this is in Hamilton. And I won't say the name of the institution that this happened in, but one of the workers was able to escape through what they were doing throughout the day because they needed medical attention. They came to my office. We were offering them primary care. In the process of this, we had a couple different interpreters there. And we used an old AT&T interpreter service also. And they said that I need help. And so we said, well, what kind of help do you need? And then they broke down, started crying about it. Then it took maybe 2 hours before we got them to show us what they were talking about. And it was a local church. We went to the local church, and this was after hours. Everyone had already gone, but she had a separate entrance to go in. And we went in with her in that separate entrance. It was a very dangerous situation. I would not recommend anyone ever doing that. But we followed her to see exactly what she was talking about. We went to the main floor, close to where the chapel was. There was a basement entrance floorboard. You open it up, and down inside, we found, I think, 13 young girls. And they were there, stuck there. imprisoned there and being forced to go out at night to work the streets for sex trafficking. We called the police. Huge investigation enrolled, but the pastor of that particular church took immediate action because they couldn't arrest him without a warrant and all that sort of thing. When they went in there, they could not find anyone there, and he removed them. He took them to a totally different location.
Wow.
And that happens daily. This is not a new thing, but this is exactly what they do. They'll bring them in mass. They believe that they are in threat of any sort of danger, bodily harm, that sort of thing. And we did eventually find them again and found that there was a lot of bodily harm happening, a lot of abuse happening, and he was finally charged with something.
Well, Dwayne, I appreciate you taking the time to come and to share really such difficult and horrendous accounts of what exploitation looks like in our community so that folks can better understand and learn what is happening on the ground here in Ontario. We are going to take a short break and then we will continue this conversation when we get back.
Public transit, garbage pickup, parks and recreation programs, snow removal on your street. How can you stay informed about these and other important local services? Tune to City Council coverage on Rogers TV. See your community leaders at work on Rogers TV City Council coverage.
Hello, I'm Liz Dowdsville, Lieutenant Governor of Ontario. In 2008, carbon monoxide, a deadly invisible gas, killed an entire family in our province. That tragedy led to a new law requiring homes with potential CO sources to have alarms. John Gignac's family members passed away that day, and he shares his story to save others.
Please make sure you have working CO alarms in your home. Protect your family today.
October 5th, 2014, my daughter was hit by a train. She was walking along the sides of the tracks, and it shattered her world.
Hi, and welcome back to Freedom Fighters Code Gray. In today's episode, Dwayne O'Connor, the Executive Director from the MNLTC, is here to share his knowledge and expertise working in social services, but also now more specifically with folks who have been impacted by human trafficking. And so, Dwayne, just to start this segment of the show, I'm wondering if you could shed light on, why does trafficking happen, and why do you think, in part, it exists?
Okay, so in a brief description for that, I think it's a huge subject, but to be honest and to be very transparent about it, these are criminals that are doing this work. It's not anything to be normalized in the least bit, but this is a socioeconomic issue. Mm-hmm. So there are so many gaps in the actual system itself, especially if you're a new immigrant, where you're coming in, you can't exactly go to work full time because you don't have your papers, you don't have anything else. They will tell you that it's not possible to work, but people need to survive, so they will go out and work for cash, under the table as people call it, and then that's where a lot of these different traffickers will find them. They'll see that they are vulnerable, they need some assistance in some sort of way, but more than anything, they need money. And they realize, those particular traffickers realize that they can make money by taking these people, putting them to work in a certain subsect, whether that's either sex trafficking, working in employment in some other place that's not legitimate, and they will make money off of that. If you can get one employee normally paid minimum wage, instead of paying that one person here in Canada, you have 10. They can do the same amount of, do a lot more work, but for the same amount of pay that you would pay one person. I mean, that's very attractive to these criminals, right? So that's exactly why they do this. And they want to make sure they're making money. Then that leads over to other forms of despair. They get into the drug industry. Next thing you know, they're selling drugs. Yeah, it's a huge impact. And in Canada, if we try to focus in and close the door on where these different loopholes are. When people are here, they need to have money, funds, or at least something to actually to supplement so they can actually survive while they're waiting on their papers to get done. That would eliminate at least a big portion of them having to go to people that are nefariously thinking of actually making money off of them.
I think what you're highlighting here is so essential, because often when we talk about like, how can we prevent trafficking, why does it happen? It sometimes can be framed as like someone's individual responsibility to know more, to be able to make different choices, for example. But what you're really pointing to is like a structural issue that we have in society regarding how people, in particular newcomers, are supported or not, and the supports they have or lack thereof when they arrive in Canada. And people, as you've mentioned, like they need money to survive, to feed themselves, right? To put a roof over their head, to get their basic necessities. You mentioned that one of the ways that this could be addressed would be like fixing loopholes, so to speak.
Yes.
Could you identify maybe like one loophole and how you see that potentially being resolved?
So, well, the one main loophole that keeps coming up over and over again is there's this lag period while you're doing your paperwork. You're allowed to come into the country, but you're not allowed to work right away. Mm-hmm. So if you don't have supplemental income, say if you don't have like a retirement savings or some other funds that came from your previous country, you will have to find a way to survive while you're there. You can't jump right into, say, an OW situation because it takes time and processing. And it's understandable because you have to prove the case and then show that you're not able to work. During that time, you're struggling. You're going to food banks, you're going to shelters, you're going to food kitchens, you're going to soup kitchens, and you're trying to get anything and everything you can in order to just live day to day. Unless you have funds, which some people do, but not everybody does. The vast majority do not. And because they don't have those funds, they'll look for other opportunities. This could be literally anyone. And I'll use myself as an example. When I first came to the country, I had a retirement plan, which was from a different country, and I was able to get money to actually sustain myself, but I didn't have enough for housing at the time while I was waiting on my paperwork to get through. I ended up finding, and this was by the grace of God, I found a place that needed someone who had varying expertise. So I knew how to fix houses, I knew how to do computer networking, I knew how to do mental health and assessment design. I worked for a company that was downtown Toronto to help get people who were coming out of a mental health hospital in order to get on their feet. So I offered my services, and the only thing I asked for in return was that you let me live here until my paperwork gets done. Let me stay here. I'll stay in a room just like all the other clients, and just that's what I need. I did that for, I think, 4 months straight in order to actually just have a place, roof over my head, running water, accessibility to certain things. If I hadn't had that, I would have had to either go back home to my home country or be on the street, and don't want to go through that. So, but that particular loophole is existent for a lot of different people. Some people go to family members that they know, if they have those family members, but a lot of times you're coming in and you don't have those resources set up and you don't think about it before you get here, even though there are a lot of warnings, granted, even on the website, but sometimes you just don't have the time. And you just can't get it up in time for you to be able to afford the expensive rents that are here, not to mention your food, your health care, if you can get health care. And then you have to struggle. And then if someone comes around and says to you and your family, hey, I can help you out, and they don't seem like, they don't look like a creepy monster at first. They look like, this nice, well-dressed person coming through, and they're offering me something to get me and my family out of jeopardy. And so you will take into it, you buy into what they're offering, and then you find out later that you're being shipped off somewhere, or you're having to work in some place that doesn't really make a lot of sense for you at the end.
You mentioned this idea of housing, right?
Yes.
And obviously money and having some level of financial support is needed to secure most housing, and we know that shelters are just overrun at the moment.
Yes.
You know, beds are full. And so one of the things that your organization does is provide housing,
Yes.
which is outstanding, in Aurora's House.
Yes.
I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about like what is unique about Aurora's House, and how does it specifically fill in a gap, if you will, for folks who have experienced trafficking?
Okay, well, that is basically our tenement. What we go by is by people who have been human trafficked. And if they are a person who have been fleeing violence from a domestic abuser, human trafficking mostly is what we take in, but during our intake process, because there's a lot of people in need, we will get a huge list of people. We'll go down the list and interview them, see exactly what their reasons are. If they identify as being human trafficked, we ask for any sort of information regarding that, and so we'll try to actually coincide with the police and try to let them know this is happening, this was reported, but then we'll take that person in to get them adjusted. We'll give them a transition period to kind of get on their feet. We'll provide mental health case counseling for them, and if they have children, same thing. We will also give them kind of an education on how to survive in Canada, activities of daily living, life skills, and we will also do budgetary things with them and also help them find additional housing for after they leave Aurora House. A lot of times people end up being with us for a good year before they find something because the budget is not there. We'll even help them find a job. In MNLCT, we do job training as well. While they're doing job training, we have trauma-informed care to provide them counseling while they're going through that.
So your organization, and through this housing space, it's not just like, oh, here's a bed and come and stay. You're really providing holistic care,
Yes.
assisting from whether it's budget planning or addressing mental health needs and caring for the whole family, right? Kids
Yes.
included.
Yes.
That's so incredible. With the 1 minute we have left, I was just wondering if there was anything else that you thought was important to share.
I would say, one, please give to your local community. If you know of any agency that's dealing with human trafficking, please try to support them as best you can. Also, for people to be more aware. Just when you go out to a restaurant, you go to a downtown facility, or you go to an entertainment venue, keep your eye out. You'll be able to find them. They are almost everywhere. And if you can identify that, get the word out, people will actually start to report it on a more regular basis, then they'll have a reason to actually go after these people that are misusing other people.
And giving in this time, I think that's an important reminder for folks, because we're living in difficult times, but remembering that there are community services who rely on the contributions of their community to keep assisting folks who are going through things and experiencing violence or barriers to support that are difficult for some folks to imagine. So thank you so much, Dwayne, for taking the time to have this conversation here with me today. If you are tuning into this episode today and you are looking for information and support related to human trafficking, you can call the Human Trafficking Hotline 24/7 at 1-833-900-1010. Again, that's 1-833-900-1010. Thanks so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Freedom Fighters Code Gray, and we hope to catch you next time.